The scream of hunting horns split the autumn morning like the shriek of dying men, and Philip Harrow knew what it meant before he even reached his doorway. He stood in the threshold of his timber farmhouse, one hand braced against the frame, watching the smoke rise from the valley below. 3 columns, maybe 4. The bountymen had come at dawn, as they always did, when the mist still clung to the ground and made it harder for their prey to see them coming. Philip had heard the stories in town last market day. An orc had been spotted near the old mill road traveling alone. The magistrate had posted a reward, 50 silver crowns for capture, 30 for proof of death. Philip spat into the dirt and turned back inside. He had plowing to finish before the ground froze, and whatever was happening down in the valley was none of his concern. He had learned that lesson the hard way 3 years back, when he had tried to speak up for a half-orc laborer being beaten in the town square. The scars on his ribs still ached when the weather turned cold. He was pulling on his work gloves when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the distant baying of hounds, a rustle in the tall grass behind his barn, followed by a low, desperate breathing. Philip froze. Every instinct told him to ignore it, to walk the other direction, to go about his day. Instead, he found himself moving toward the barn, his boots crunching through the frost-stiffened weeds. She was crouched behind the water trough, pressed so flat against the barn wall that he might have missed her, if not for the vivid green of her skin against the weathered gray wood. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair matted with burrs and leaves, falling in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her clothes were torn, a simple traveling dress that might have been brown once, but was now mostly mud. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage on her left arm. Her amber eyes went wide when she saw him, and her hand moved instinctively to the small knife at her belt. 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, white against the green of her skin. Her pointed ears twitched, catching sounds Philip could not yet hear. She was shaking, whether from cold or fear or exhaustion he could not tell. "Please," she whispered, and the word came out cracked and raw. "Please, I will move on. I just need a moment to breathe." Philip should have sent her away, should have told her to run, quickly, before the bountymen reached his property, should have thought about his own safety, his own farm, the life he had built in careful solitude after the war. Instead, he glanced back toward the valley, saw the smoke growing thicker, heard the horns growing louder. "How many are tracking you?" he asked quietly. 6, maybe 7. She swallowed hard. "They have been following me for 2 days. I cannot run anymore." Philip made a decision he knew he would likely regret. "Come with me, now, quickly." She stared at him, disbelief written across her features. "You would help me?" "I would prefer not to watch someone die in my yard before breakfast," he said. "Now move before I change my mind." She stumbled to her feet, favoring her right leg, and followed him as he strode quickly back to the house. He could hear the hounds clearly now, their howling taking on the frenzied pitch that meant they had found a fresh trail. They had minutes at best. Philip pushed open the door to his root cellar, the wooden entrance built into the floor of his kitchen. "Down there. There's a space beneath the far shelf where the boards do not quite meet the wall. You can fit if you squeeze." She looked down into the darkness, then back at him, searching his face for the trick, the betrayal. "Why?" "Because I've seen enough killing," Philip said. "Now get down there." She descended the ladder quickly, despite her limp. Philip followed her down, pulling a lamp from its hook to light their way. The cellar was small, lined with shelves holding preserved vegetables, dried meat, and sacks of grain. He led her to the far corner and moved aside a shelf, revealing a narrow gap where the floorboards above did not quite extend to the wall. "There was a family who lived here before me," Philip explained as she squeezed into the space. "During the last war, they hid refugees. The previous owner told me about this place. I never thought I would use it." She wedged herself into the narrow crawl space, pulling her knees to her chest. In the lamplight, her eyes gleamed like polished amber, and Philip saw intelligence there, and fear, and something that might have been hope. "What is your name?" he asked. "Renna Greymane." "Philip Harrow. Stay silent no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" She nodded, and he slid the shelf back into place, then arranged several sacks of potatoes in front of it to make the corner look undisturbed. He was climbing back up the ladder when the first pounding came at his door. Philip took a moment to compose himself, running a hand through his dark hair before opening the door. 7 men stood in his yard, 3 on horseback, 4 on foot with hunting dogs straining at their leashes. The leader, a thick-necked man with a scarred face and the silver badge of a licensed bounty hunter pinned to his leather coat, looked Philip up and down with unconcealed contempt. "Morning," the man said, though his tone made it clear he did not care whether Philip found it morning or not. "Name is Vance. We are tracking an orc. Female. Young. Dogs followed her scent right to your property." "I have not seen anyone," Philip said calmly. "Been working inside all morning." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Dogs do not lie. She came this way. Maybe she went around. I've got a good stretch of land here. Easy enough to cross without being seen." One of the men on foot, younger, with the overeager eyes of someone hungry to prove himself, spoke up. "We should search the buildings, make sure he's not hiding her." Philip kept his expression neutral. "You are welcome to look around the barn and the outbuildings, but I would prefer you not enter my house without proper authority." Vance studied him for a long moment. Philip had seen men like this during the war, men who enjoyed the hunt more than the capture, who saw violence as entertainment rather than necessity. "You fought in the border campaigns," Vance said suddenly. "I remember you. Philip Harrow. You were with the 3rd Regiment." "I was. Heard you went soft. Tried to stop a disciplinary action in town a few years back. I suggested there were better ways to handle a labor dispute than public beatings." Vance's smile was cold. "And look where it got you. Living out here alone, away from decent folk." He jerked his head toward his men. "Search everything. Barn, shed, chicken coop. I want that orc found." The men spread out across Philip's property with the dogs. Philip stood in his doorway, forcing himself to breathe normally, to show nothing. He watched them tear through his barn, upending tools and hay bales. They searched his shed, his small stable where his plow horse stamped nervously. They looked in the chicken coop, scattering his hens into panicked flight. All the while, Vance stood in the yard, watching Philip with a predator's patience. "You know what the reward is for harboring one of them?" Vance asked conversationally. "Same as the bounty for the orc herself, 50 silver crowns. Of course, in your case, we would not be paying it. We would be collecting it from whatever we could sell off your property after you were hanged." "Good thing I have nothing to hide then," Philip said. One of the bounty men emerged from the barn, shaking his head. "Nothing, sir. No sign of her." The dogs were circling now, confused, losing the scent. The trail had gone cold at Philip's property line, and they could not pick it up again. Renna must have crossed water somewhere or used some other method to mask her scent before reaching his farm. Vance's jaw tightened with frustration. He walked slowly toward Philip, stopping just at the base of the porch steps. "I know she came this way. I know it." "Then perhaps she is cleverer than you gave her credit for," Philip said quietly. For a moment, he thought Vance might order his men to search the house anyway, authority or not, but one of the mounted men called out that the dogs had picked up something at the edge of the woods to the north, and Vance's attention shifted. "This is not over, Harrow," Vance said. "I will be keeping an eye on you. I am sure you have better things to do with your time." Vance mounted his horse and wheeled it around, calling his men to follow. They thundered off toward the northern tree line, hounds baying, leaving Philip's yard churned with hoofprints and boot marks. Philip waited until they were out of sight before he moved. Even then, he forced himself to walk calmly back into his house, to close the door, to wait another full minute in case someone had stayed behind to watch. Finally, he opened the cellar door and descended. He moved the sacks in the shelf aside. Renna was exactly where he had left her, curled in the narrow space, her whole body rigid with tension. "They are gone," Philip said softly. "You can come out." She unfolded herself slowly, wincing as cramped muscles protested. When she emerged fully into the lamplight, Philip saw that she was crying silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. "I thought they would find me," she whispered. "I thought I would die here." "You are safe. For now." Philip climbed back up the ladder, and after a moment, she followed. In the kitchen, the autumn sunlight streaming through the windows seemed too bright, too normal after the darkness of the cellar. Renna stood uncertainly in the center of the room, looking around at the simple furnishings, the neat stacks of firewood by the stove, the shelf of books Philip had collected over the years. "Sit," Philip said, gesturing to the table. "You are injured. Let me see your arm." She sank into the chair as if her legs could no longer hold her. Philip brought water and clean cloth, along with the medical kit he kept for the inevitable cuts and injuries of farm work. As he carefully unwrapped the dirty bandage on her arm, he saw the wound beneath, a long gash that looked like it had come from a blade. "How did this happen?" he asked as he began to clean it. "One of them got close yesterday," Renna said, her voice steadier now. "I fought back, got away, but not before he marked me." The wound was deep but clean. Philip worked efficiently, the old military training coming back to him. He had stitched up enough injuries during the war to know what he was doing. "This will hurt," he warned, threading a needle with catgut. She nodded, gripping the edge of the table. As he worked, she barely flinched, though he saw the tension in her jaw, the way her knuckles went white. When he finished and bandaged the arm properly, she let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said. "I do not understand why you are doing this, but thank you." Philip put away his supplies and brought her bread and cheese along with a mug of water. She ate like someone who had not had a proper meal in days, which she probably had not. "Why are they hunting you?" he asked, sitting across from her. "What did you do?" Renna swallowed, then met his eyes directly. "I existed, that is all. I was traveling with a merchant caravan, doing labor work, legal. I had papers. But we passed through a town where the mayor has a hatred for my kind. He accused me of theft, posted a bounty. No trial, no evidence, just his word." She paused. "The merchant I worked for tried to speak up for me. They threatened to burn his wagons. He had a family. I told him to let me go." Philip nodded slowly. He had heard similar stories before. In the years since the war, the treaties were supposed to protect orcs who lived peacefully in human lands. But treaties meant nothing to men like Vance, or to town mayors looking to score political points with fearful citizens. "You cannot stay here," Philip said, though the words felt hollow. "They will come back. They will watch this place." "I know." Renna looked down at her hands, at the green skin that marked her as different, as other. "I'm sorry I brought this to your door. I will leave as soon as it is dark." "Leave to go where? They will have men watching the roads." "Then I will go through the wilderness. I have survived worse." "Not with that arm, you will not, and not with winter coming." Philip stood, pacing to the window. The valley below was still smoking. "The next settlement friendly to orcs is 40 miles north, past the Thornwood Forest. You would never make it in your condition." "Then I will die trying. Better that than being taken by those men." There was a finality in her voice that Philip recognized. He had heard it before, in the voices of soldiers who knew their wounds were fatal, who wanted only to die on their own terms. He thought of the men he had failed to save during the war, the faces that still haunted his dreams. "Or," he said slowly, the idea forming even as he spoke, "you stay here, hidden, until you heal and the search moves on." Renna stared at him. "You would do that? Risk everything for a stranger?" "I would risk being a decent human being for once in my life," Philip said. "I have lived quietly since the war, kept my head down, avoided trouble. Maybe it is time I remembered why I fought in the first place." "You did not fight for orcs," Renna said quietly. "Your side killed plenty of mine. I fought because I believed the war was about building something better, a world where the treaties would actually mean something, where people could live without fear." He turned to face her. "Seems I failed at that. Maybe this is a chance to do something right." For a long moment they looked at each other across the simple kitchen, human and orc, two people caught in circumstances neither had chosen. "I do not even know if I can trust you," Renna said finally. "For all I know, you were just waiting to collect the bounty yourself. If I wanted the bounty, I would have let Vance search the house. Maybe you just want a bigger reward. Turn me in yourself, claim you captured me alone." Philip could not fault her suspicion. In her place, he would have felt the same. "You are free to leave whenever you want. The door is not locked. But if you stay, I will do everything I can to keep you safe. That is all I can offer." Renna closed her eyes, and Philip saw the exhaustion in every line of her body. The fear, the pain, the weight of running for days with no rest. When she opened her eyes again, there was resignation there, but also a spark of something that might have been hope. "I will stay," she said, "for now, until I heal. But if those men come back—" "If they come back, you hide again. We will figure this out as we go." Over the following days, they fell into a cautious routine. Renna stayed in the cellar during daylight hours, emerging only after dark when Philip was certain no one was watching the property. He brought her food, water, blankets to make the space more comfortable. In the evenings, she would come up to the kitchen and they would eat together in the lamplight, speaking in low voices about inconsequential things. Philip learned that she had been born in a clan settlement in the northern mountains, that she had left when she was 16 to find work in human lands because her family was struggling. She sent money home when she could. She had been saving to open her own business someday, maybe a small tavern or inn where both humans and orcs would be welcome. A foolish dream, she said with a bitter smile, as if humans would ever share space with us willingly. Some would, Philip said. Not everyone is like Vance. Enough are. That's what matters. Renna learned that Philip had inherited the farm from an uncle who had died without children. He had come here after the war, looking for peace, for a place where the screaming would stop echoing in his head. He had been engaged once to a woman from town, but she had broken it off when he spoke up for the half-orc laborer. She said I was choosing them over my own people, Philip said, staring into his cup. Maybe she was right. She was wrong, Renna said firmly. Choosing not to watch someone be beaten is not betrayal. It is being human, really human, not just the shape of one. As the days passed, Philip noticed small changes. The fear in Renna's eyes began to fade, replaced by watchful curiosity. She started to smile occasionally, usually at something sarcastic Philip said about the stubbornness of his plow horse or the idiocy of his chickens. Her wound healed cleanly under Philip's care, and the limp from her leg injury gradually disappeared. She insisted on helping with work she could do in the cellar, mending clothes, sorting stored vegetables, organizing supplies. Philip would come down to find everything arranged with meticulous efficiency, and Renna looking pleased with herself. I cannot sit idle, she explained. I will go mad. On the 8th night of her stay, Philip came down to bring dinner and found her examining his books, which he had brought to the cellar to give her something to occupy her mind during the long daylight hours. You have read all of these? She asked, running her fingers over the spines. Most of them. I collected them during the war, traded for them, bought them when I could. I never learned to read well, Renna admitted. We did not have many books in my clan. My mother taught me some, but she died when I was young. I could teach you, Philip offered, if you want. We have time. So the evenings took on a new pattern. After dinner they would sit at the kitchen table, and Philip would help Renna work through the simpler books he owned. She was a quick student, determined and focused. When she successfully read a whole page without his help, her grin was so bright it transformed her entire face, and Philip felt something shift in his chest. He tried not to think about it, tried to maintain the careful distance between them. She was in his protection, dependent on him for safety. Any feelings beyond that would be taking advantage, would be wrong. But it was becoming harder to ignore the way his pulse quickened when she laughed, or the warmth he felt when she fell asleep in the chair while reading, and he had to wake her gently to send her back to the cellar before dawn. The way she looked at him sometimes, with a softness that had not been there at the beginning, made him wonder if she felt it too. On the 15th day, everything changed. Philip was working in the barn when he saw riders approaching from the south. Not Vance and his bounty hunters this time, but 2 town constables he recognized. His stomach sank as they dismounted in his yard. Harrow, the older constable said. His name was Marcus, and he had served alongside Philip during the war. We need to talk. About what? About the fact that Vance has filed a formal complaint alleging you are harboring a fugitive. The magistrate sent us to conduct an official search of your property. Philip's mind raced. On what evidence? On the evidence that Vance's dogs tracked the orc to your farm and the trail went cold. On the evidence that you have a history of sympathizing with non-humans. On the evidence that the magistrate is up for re-election and wants to look tough on law enforcement. Marcus met Philip's eyes. I am sorry. I do not like this any more than you do, but we have our orders. The second constable was already moving toward the house. Philip had no choice but to step aside and let them search. They went through the barn first, more thorough than Vance's men had been. Then, the shed, the stable, the chicken coop. Finally, the house. Philip stood in the kitchen, his heart pounding, as they opened cupboards, looked under the bed, checked behind furniture. Marcus moved toward the cellar door. What is down there? He asked. Root cellar, vegetables, preserved food, the usual. Marcus opened the door and descended. Philip heard him moving around below, shifting things. Renna would be in her hiding space behind the shelf. He had warned her days ago that this might happen, that she must stay absolutely silent no matter what. The seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, Marcus climbed back up, his expression unreadable. "Nothing," he said to the other constable, "just storage." They searched for another 20 minutes but found no evidence of Renna's presence. When they finally left, Marcus paused at the door. "I am a constable, Philip. I enforce the law. But I am also a man who remembers what you did during the war. How many of us you saved." He lowered his voice. "I did not look as closely in that cellar as I could have. Do you understand me?" Philip understood. "Thank you, Marcus." "Do not thank me. Just be smart. Vance is not going to let this go. He has got it in his head that you are hiding her, and he is a dog with a bone. Watch yourself." After they left, Philip waited until nightfall before going down to the cellar. Renna emerged from her hiding space, and he saw that she had been crying. "I heard them," she said. "I heard how close they came. Philip, I cannot stay here. I'm going to get you killed." "You're not going anywhere," Philip said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "We have come this far, we can see it through." "To what end? I cannot hide forever. Eventually they will find me, or you will slip up, or someone will see something, and when they do, they will hang you alongside me. Then we make sure they do not find out." Renna looked at him with something close to desperation. "Why are you doing this? Really? It cannot just be about doing the right thing. You could have let me go days ago, sent me on my way with supplies and directions. Why risk everything to keep me here?" Philip opened his mouth to give her the same answer he had been giving himself. Because it was the right thing to do. Because he could not stand by and watch someone die. Because the world needed more kindness and less cruelty. But standing there in the lamplight, seeing the tears on her face, the fear and confusion, and something else he was afraid to name in her eyes, he could not lie. "Because I care about you," he said quietly. "Because somewhere in these past weeks you stopped being a stranger I was helping and became someone I do not want to lose." The silence that followed was deafening. Renna stared at him, her expression shocked. "You cannot mean that," she whispered. "I am an orc. You are human. That is not how this works." "I know what you are. I know what I am. I also know that I look forward to the evenings when we read together more than anything else in my day. That when I hear you laugh, it is the best sound in the world. That the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I am losing something precious." Philip ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to articulate what he felt. "I am not asking you to feel the same. I am just answering your question honestly." Renna's eyes were wet with tears again, but these seemed different from before. "You stupid, foolish man," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Do you think you are the only one who has been feeling this? Do you think I have not noticed how gentle you are when you change my bandages, or how patient you are when I struggle with reading? Or how you always give me the bigger portion at dinner, even though you are the one doing hard labor all day? Renna, I have been trying so hard not to care about you," she continued, the words spilling out now like water breaching a dam. "Because I knew it was impossible, because I knew that even if we both felt something, there was no future in it. A human and an orc. The world would never allow it." "The world does not get to decide for us," Philip said. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "The world already has decided. There is a bounty on my head. You are risking your life just by hiding me. What kind of future could we possibly have?" Philip took a step closer to her. "I do not know, but I know I would rather have an uncertain future with you than a safe one alone." Renna reached up and touched his face, her hand trembling. Her skin was warm, her touch gentle despite the strength he knew she possessed. "You are the first human who has ever looked at me like I matter," she said softly. "Like I am not just a thing to be feared or used or discarded. You matter more than you know." She kissed him then, tentative and uncertain, and Philip felt the world shift around them. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Renna's eyes were bright with tears and something that looked like joy. "This is madness," she said. "Probably. We will both regret this." "I doubt that very much." She kissed him again, more firmly this time, and Philip wrapped his arms around her, feeling the solid strength of her, the realness of her. For a moment, the danger and the fear and the impossible circumstances all faded, and there was only this: two people who had found something precious in the most unlikely of places. But the moment could not last forever. Eventually, they pulled apart, and the reality of their situation came crashing back. "What do we do now?" Renna asked. "I have been thinking about that," Philip said. "There is a man I know, a former army contact who lives about 30 miles east. He runs an underground network that helps non-humans escape to the Northern Territories where the laws are more lenient. If I can get word to him, he might be able to help you get out of the country. And then what? I run away and we never see each other again? Or I come with you?" Renna's eyes widened. "You would leave your home, your farm, everything you have built? This farm is just land and timber. You are something more." Philip took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I am not saying it would be easy. I am not saying there would not be hardships. But I would rather face those hardships with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and kind and stubborn as hell. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes and cry over sad passages in books. I know you reorganize my cellar storage and then get embarrassed when I thank you for it." He smiled. "I know I want to learn everything else over the years to come." Renna was crying openly now, but she was smiling too. "You are insane." "Probably. Is that a yes?" "It is a we will figure this out together." Over the next week, Philip made careful preparations. He sent a coded message to his contact in the East, asking for help. He began quietly selling off livestock and equipment, telling anyone who asked that he was thinking of downsizing before winter. He packed supplies, sturdy clothes, preserved food, everything they would need for a long journey. All the while, Vance and his men continued to patrol the valley, watching, waiting. Philip saw them from a distance several times, always careful not to do anything that would draw suspicion. The tension was a constant weight on his shoulders, the knowledge that one mistake would destroy everything. Renna spent her days in the cellar, reading the books Philip brought her, and her evenings with Philip, making plans, talking about the future. They spoke of the Northern Territories, where mixed communities of humans and orcs lived without the constant threat of persecution. They spoke of starting fresh, building something new together. "I have never been much of a farmer," Renna admitted one night. "But I am good with numbers, and I am a hard worker. We could make it work." "We will make it work," Philip said firmly. On the 23rd day, the reply came. Philip's contact sent word through a traveling merchant that he could provide safe passage, but they would need to move quickly. There was a caravan leaving for the northern border in 5 days, and they could join it if they reached the meeting point in time. It meant traveling 30 miles through dangerous country in the dead of night, avoiding patrols and bounty hunters. It meant leaving everything Philip had built over the past 3 years. It meant trusting their lives to a network of strangers. "It is our best chance," Philip told Renna that night, "maybe our only chance." "Then we take it," she said without hesitation. They set out on the 28th day, 2 hours after midnight, when the moon was dark and the world was wrapped in shadow. Philip locked the door of his farmhouse, leaving behind furniture and tools and books, taking only what they could carry in 2 packs. It felt like closing a chapter of his life, and while there was sadness in it, there was also a strange sense of relief. Renna wore a hooded cloak that concealed her features, and they moved through the darkness like ghosts, following old game trails and creek beds to avoid the roads. Philip had walked these hills during his first months at the farm, and he used that knowledge now, navigating by stars and memory. They had covered perhaps 10 miles when they heard the sound that made Philip's blood run cold, hounds baying in the distance behind them. "They know we are gone," Renna said, her voice tight with fear. "Someone must have been watching after all." "Run," Philip said. "We need to reach the thornwood before they catch up." They ran through the darkness, stumbling over roots and stones, branches whipping at their faces. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, the baying of hounds, the shouts of men. Philip's lungs burned, his legs aching with effort, but he pushed himself harder, pulling Renna along when she stumbled. They burst into the thornwood forest just as the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon. The trees here were ancient, thick-trunked and gnarled, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out much of the sky. Philip led them deeper into the woods, hoping the dense undergrowth and confusing terrain would slow the bounty hunters. They ran until they could run no more, finally collapsing behind a massive fallen tree, gasping for air. Philip risked a look back and saw torches in the distance, moving through the trees. "We need to split up," Renna said suddenly. "They are following both of us. If I go alone, draw them away, you can escape." "Absolutely not. Philip, be reasonable." "No." He gripped her shoulders, looking into her eyes. "We stay together. Whatever happens, we face it together." That was the deal. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. Philip looked around frantically, searching for anything that could help them. That was when he saw it. A rocky outcropping about 50 yards away, with what looked like a narrow opening at its base. "There," he said, pointing. "It might be a cave. If we can get inside, we can defend the entrance." They scrambled up the slope to the outcropping. The opening was indeed a cave, narrow but deep enough to provide shelter. They squeezed inside just as the first of the bounty hunters emerged into view below. It was Vance, along with 4 of his men and 2 hounds, straining at their leashes. They spread out, searching the area, the dogs sniffing at the ground. "I know you are here, Harrow," Vance called out. "I know you ran with the orc. Come out now, and maybe the magistrate will show mercy." Philip and Renna pressed deeper into the cave, barely breathing. One of the dogs caught their scent and began pulling its handler toward the rocky outcropping. "Check those rocks," Vance ordered. Philip pulled his knife, the only weapon he had. It would be useless against 5 men, but he would not let them take Renna without a fight. The bounty hunter with the dog started climbing the slope toward the cave entrance. He was 10 feet away when an arrow took him in the shoulder, spinning him around with a cry of pain. Everyone froze. Vance whirled, searching for the source of the arrow. A second arrow hissed out of the trees, missing him by inches. "Fall back," Vance shouted. "We have got hostile archers." The bounty hunters retreated in disarray, dragging their wounded companion with them. More arrows followed them, fired from multiple positions in the forest, driving them away from the outcropping. Philip and Renna waited in the cave, hardly daring to believe what had happened. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then a voice called out from the trees. "Philip Harrow, if that is you in the cave, come out slowly with your hands visible." Philip recognized the voice and nearly sagged with relief. He emerged from the cave with Renna close behind and saw a half-dozen figures standing among the trees, all armed with bows. The leader was a tall man with gray-streaked hair and a scarred face Philip knew well. "Silas," Philip said, "you came." "Got your message," Silas replied. "Figured you would need help getting to the meeting point. Good thing we started tracking you when we did." His eyes moved to Renna, assessing her with the practical gaze of someone who had seen much and judged little. "This is her?" "This is Renna," Silas nodded. "Well met, Renna. I am Silas Hammond, and I run what some might call a criminal enterprise, and I call basic human decency. We need to move quickly. Vance will not stay scared off for long, and he will probably come back with more men." They traveled with Silas's group for 2 days, moving through hidden trails and secret paths that Philip never would have found on his own. The network Silas had built was impressive, a chain of safe houses and sympathetic contacts that stretched all the way to the northern border. On the 3rd day, they reached the meeting point, a small valley where a caravan of wagons waited. There were perhaps 20 vehicles in all, some carrying supplies, others rigged to carry passengers. Philip saw humans and orcs working together, loading goods, tending horses, preparing for the journey north. "This caravan runs twice a year," Silas explained. "Takes people like you to the northern territories, brings back trade goods. The border guards are paid to look the other way. It is not cheap, but it is reliable." Philip paid the passage fee from the money he had saved from selling his farm equipment. It was nearly everything he had, but he did not hesitate. The caravan master, a gruff woman named Mara, looked them over with experienced eyes. "You will work your passage," she said. "Man your size can help with the heavy lifting. Woman can cook, mend, whatever she's good at. We take care of our own, but everyone contributes." "We will pull our weight," Renna assured her. The caravan departed at noon, a long train of wagons rolling north through the autumn countryside. Philip and Renna rode in the back of a supply wagon, surrounded by sacks of grain and barrels of preserved food. For the first time in nearly a month, Philip felt himself begin to relax. They were not safe yet, but they were moving toward safety, toward freedom. Renna leaned against his shoulder as the wagon rolled along, and Philip wrapped his arm around her. Neither of them spoke, content just to be together, to have survived. The journey north took 12 days. They passed through forests and over hills, avoiding major towns, stopping each night at pre-arranged campsites. Philip worked alongside other men to set up tents, tend the horses, help repair a broken wagon wheel. Renna helped in the cooking rotation and spent time with the other orc refugees, trading stories and advice. On the 8th day, they crossed into the northern territories. The landscape changed subtly, the hills growing steeper, the forests denser. But more significantly, the attitude changed. They passed through a town where humans and orcs lived side by side, where mixed couples walked openly in the streets, where the local constable was herself an orc. "It is not perfect here either," Mara warned them when Philip commented on it. "There is still prejudice, still problems. But at least the law recognizes everyone as people. That is a start." On the 12th day, the caravan reached its destination, a large frontier settlement called North Haven. It was built where 3 rivers met, a natural trading hub that had grown into a thriving town. The buildings were a mix of human and orcish architecture, timber and stone combined in practical ways. Mara helped them find lodging, a small room above a tavern, while they looked for more permanent housing. Philip still had a little money left, enough to last a month or two if they were careful. After that, they would need to find work. It took 3 weeks, but eventually, Philip found employment at a lumber mill on the outskirts of town. The work was hard, but the pay was fair, and his boss did not care that he lived with an orc woman. Renna found work at a merchant's office, keeping accounts and managing inventory. Her quick mind for numbers impressed the merchant, and within a month she was handling all his bookkeeping. They rented a small house, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. Philip built furniture in the evenings, simple chairs and a table. Renna hung curtains and planted herbs in the tiny garden. It was not much, but it felt like home in a way Philip's farm never quite had. Winter came early to the north that year, bringing snow that piled in drifts against their door. But inside, their home was warm. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, Renna reading aloud from the books they had managed to buy, Philip listening with his eyes closed. Content. On a cold night in late winter, Philip built up the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Marry me," he said suddenly, interrupting a passage Renna was reading about ancient kingdoms. She stopped mid-sentence and looked at him. "What?" "Marry me. I know we have not been here long, and I know things are still uncertain, but I know I want to spend my life with you. I know I do not want to wait any longer to make it official." Renna set down the book slowly. "You're serious." "Completely serious. I do not have a ring. I do not have much of anything, really. But I have a job and a home and a heart that belongs entirely to you. If you will have me, I would be honored to be your husband." For a moment, he thought she might cry again, as she had that night in the cellar when he first told her he cared about her. But instead, she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, you ridiculous, wonderful man." They married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the local temple. The priestess who performed the service was an elderly human woman who had been conducting mixed-species marriages for 20 years and viewed it as her sacred duty. Silas and several members of the caravan came to witness, along with a few people Philip and Renna had befriended in North Haven. It was not a grand wedding, but it was real. Philip wore his best shirt, cleaned and mended. Renna wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, dyed a deep green that complemented her skin. When they exchanged vows, promising to stand together through whatever came, Philip felt more at peace than he had since before the war. They celebrated with a small gathering at the tavern where they had first stayed, sharing food and drink with friends who had become like family. As the evening wore on and people began to drift away, Philip and Renna walked home through the snow-covered streets, hand in hand. "We made it," Renna said quietly, looking up at the stars. "Against all the odds, we actually made it." "We did," Philip agreed, pulling her close. "And this is just the beginning." Spring came eventually, as it always does, bringing with it new growth and new possibilities. Philip took on extra work at the lumber mill and began saving money with a specific goal in mind. Renna continued to excel at the merchant's office, and her employer began talking about making her a partner in the business. They talked sometimes about what they had left behind, about Philip's farm in the valley and Renna's family in the mountains. They talked about writing letters, about someday perhaps visiting, though both knew it might never be safe enough for that. But they never talked about regrets, because there were none. One warm afternoon in early summer, a full year after Renna had first hidden behind Philip's barn, they walked together to the edge of town where a piece of land had recently come up for sale. It was small, just a few acres, but it had a good water supply and fertile soil. "I have been thinking," Philip said, looking out over the land. "I know you said you never wanted to be a farmer, but what if we built something here? Not a farm exactly, but maybe an orchard. Apples, pears, things that do not require constant heavy labor. We could hire help during harvest season." Renna looked at the land, then at Philip, her eyes thoughtful. "An orchard," she said slowly. "That could work. We could also plant a large garden, sell vegetables at the market. I have been learning about business from the merchant. We could make it profitable. Is that a yes?" She kissed him, there in the sunlight with the whole valley spread out below them. "It is a yes. Let us build something beautiful together." They purchased the land a week later, spending most of their savings, but securing something that was truly theirs. Over the following months, they worked the soil, planted young trees, built a small shed for tools and supplies. It was hard work, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. Their neighbors, both human and orc, came to help with the larger tasks, and in return, Philip and Renna helped others with their own projects. A community was forming around them, people who believed in building something better, who saw past the old prejudices and fears. On their first wedding anniversary, they stood in their orchard at sunset, looking at the rows of young trees that would someday provide fruit for years to come. Renna's hand rested on her belly, which was just beginning to round with the child they had learned about 2 weeks earlier. "Our daughter will grow up here," Renna said softly. "She will climb these trees, eat their fruit. She will never know what it is like to run and hide for being who she is." "She will know she is loved," Philip said, his hand covering Renna's on her belly. "She will know that love is stronger than fear, and that courage is choosing to build something good even when the world says it is impossible." Renna leaned into him, and they stood there together as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the lights of North Haven began to glow in the gathering dusk, and smoke rose from hundreds of chimneys where families were sitting down to evening meals. It was not the life Philip had expected when he first opened his door and found a frightened orc girl hiding behind his barn. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. And that made it perfect. The end.